Everybody have a good day?
Yes.
Okay, it's always a good day when the Lord's with us, isn't it? All right, glad to see you tonight. And so tonight we're going to actually talk about what's going to feel like two sermons because we're going to talk about anxiety and depression. And I'm going to talk about depression first. We live in a day and age that people have the idea that we have to be up on our game all the time. We go into work on our job and they expect us to be bubbly and happy and have a smiley face and move on through our day. And if we're down, then something must be wrong with us. We're in a culture that the answer to every problem is just take a pill. And actually what we end up with is the idea that maybe if we're depressed or if we have feelings that are on the lower end of the spectrum, that must be something wrong with us. But I want to suggest to you that a range of emotions is extremely normal. God never promised us that we wouldn't have blue days and that we would also have glorious days. One of the topics tonight, or the subjects behind the topic, is that in the human experiences, we kind of tend to ride life almost like a roller coaster. We have our ups and downs. Sometimes those get extreme. And when they're extreme, that's part of what I'm talking about tonight. But in life, we will have good days and bad days. The great lessons of life are not learned during the times that we're in our ecstasy. That's not where the great lessons of life are learned. The great lessons of life are learned when we're in the valley, when we don't know where to turn or who to turn to. And that's when we end up with our spiritual experiences in turning to God. Now, there are circumstances in life that take us and can take us very suddenly, abruptly into the valley, or can take us to the pinnacle. For instance, if I were to tell you tonight that we'd had a death and someone close to you had died, it would affect you. It would affect your emotions, how your body chemistry works. On the other hand, if I were to tell you that some grand and glorious thing happened, like a Brinks truck pull up outside and they're going to pass out $1,000 worth of money to every person that's here tonight, we'd probably get all excited about that. I know I would. Well, so we have things that can happen circumstantially that take us up and down. Sometimes we have things in our body chemistry that alter that. Temperament plays a big part. There are some people that tend to be kind of melancholy most of the time. They're not particularly bubbly people, and that's okay. They still have to serve God. There are people that are all bouncy and bubbly and kind of like Tigger all the time, and they still have to serve God. And so the same rules apply to all of us. But we do have periods of times that we're up and down. And of course, I would be amiss if I didn't talk about Eeyore. Everybody knows Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. By the way, Winnie the Pooh, if you want a study of personality disorders, then all you have to do is watch a Winnie the Pooh cartoon. And it is a satire on the personality disorders. And you can figure out which disorders are which. And guess who the therapist is? Christopher Robin. That's the satire. At any rate, that's beside the point. You didn't come to hear about that tonight. So I want to talk with you about anxiety and depression and the child of God. And I want to start by, as I say, that part of the human experiences is to have depressed mood. And let's look at some Bible characters. One of those is Cain. And if you study Cain, we learn a little bit about Cain. You remember him. He was the first child. And Cain rises up and he kills his brother Abel. And he is anxious about that afterwards. Not only did he do wrong, but he is concerned that people are going to hunt him down and kill him. And so God puts a special mark on him. What that is, we don't know. But what we do know is that he was worried that he was going to be hunted down, and he actually took that to God, and God did something for him. But Cain, after he killed his brother, he had a stress response, a depression response to that, and just thought, man, there is a death note on my back any time. And he was worried about that. Another Bible character is Moses. Moses was so distraught as to the problems with this rebellious people that have come out here into the wilderness, and this rebellious people, they don't deserve what you're doing for them, God. And Moses was discouraged, and you can read about that, his discouragement and his depression. As at 80 years old, he starts the journey of his life, taking the Israelites to their land of promise. Jonah was a man who was also depressed. You don't have to read very far to find out that Jonah did not want to go over to the city of Nineveh and tell them what God wanted told. And he was concerned that if he told them that, they'd change. And if they changed, that meant that his people would be taken captive. So he wasn't very happy about that. He goes and preaches to them anyway, and you know the story. And the people of Nineveh repent, and then Jonah gets angry. Did you ever been so mad that you passed out? Well, Jonah was. He got so angry that God had saved the city. He went out on the hill outside, and it's like, all right, now I did what you asked me to do, God, and it's not going to last. So I'm going to stay here and wait for the destruction. And he's out here actually not rejoicing that people have changed, but he's mad that people have changed. And he passes out. And God teaches him that God has a concern for all of his nature, even the cattle, as well as the people, and that he cares for all of us. Well, we look at other Bible characters. One would be David, and I skipped one, and that's one I didn't want to skip, but anyway. But David was discouraged, and he got depressed. You remember his depression as the child is about to die, and his depression as his son has run him off of his throne and out of town, and David's all concerned about what's going to happen tomorrow. And my kingdom's been taken away. My son's taken over. And we're going to have to go in battle against him. And David was very discouraged. He was discouraged on this thing with Bathsheba. And here's a child that he's sitting with a dying loved one. And he's worried about that. He doesn't eat. He's not sleeping. He's very discouraged about all this. The one I skipped was Elijah. And Elijah was also a depressed Bible character. Actually, he is the most clinical case of a depressed Bible character that is in the text of God's Word. And here's the story about Elijah. Elijah leads God's people in victory on Mount Carmel in chapter 18 of 1 Kings. And where would you expect him to be after such a great and glorious victory? I'd expect him to be out here leading the people again. But where is he? He's sitting out in the wilderness under a tree, and he has a problem. His problem is that he just doesn't even want to live. And he wishes that his life would be taken from him. That's pretty serious depression. And there was a problem. Elijah's problem was, first, he was burnt out. And so for that, God brings him some food, or has some food sent to him, and some water. He hydrates, he has some food, and he rests. Sometimes that's what people need, is when they're burnt out, they burn the candle at both ends, they just need to take a chill, take a few days, and regroup themselves. But God did something else for Elijah. And that is, God had a conversation with Elijah. Now here was Elijah's real problem as to why he was depressed. It was his thinking. He had stinking thinking. And what was going on with him is that he had figured out somehow that he was the only one that was trying to do the right thing. I alone am left to tell. I'm the only one that's not bowed his knee to Baal. Now Elijah knew better than that. You read a couple chapters earlier that Obadiah, there's a book after him in the Old Testament, that Obadiah and a bunch of prophets had been hidden in a cave. And you know who hid them there? Elijah did. Elijah knew there was other people that hadn't bowed their knee. Elijah knew there were people that were victorious the day before on Mount Carmel. He knew how Israel had rallied. And yet, when he got depressed, he got tunnel vision, and he only saw the negative. And he made the grand conclusion, I'm the only one left. Now the truth is, Elijah was a poor bookkeeper. God tells him there are 7,000 who have not bowed the knee to Baal. God knew that. Elijah was just guessing and thinking he was the only one trying to do the right thing. You ever heard of the pity pot? He was on one. One of my clients who suffers with depression every once in a while, she writes music, and so I had her write a song. And that song's called the Pity Pot Song. And I had her to sing it for me during one of the sessions and to play it on her piano. And then we set up a pity pot chair. And over the pity pot chair, there's a marker board, and all the negative things you tell yourself when you're on the pity pot, write those on the board so you don't forget them. And then, if you need to go sit on the pity pot, go sit on that. But read all those things first so that you don't forget any of those things that you need to read. You know what? She hadn't been on the pity pot in 2 months. And if she acts like she's going there, I have her sing me that song. Actually, it's quite an interesting song. It's posted out there on Facebook somewhere. Anyway, but people do kind of get in that, woe is me, life is terrible, and there were Bible characters that did that. What did God do for Elijah's depression? First is, he let him rest, hydrate, and take nourishment. That's basic stuff. What else did he do? He told Elijah, if you'll just lay here under this tree for a couple thousand years, I'm going to have them down in the 21st century to develop a purple pill. And I'll have them bring you one, and you take this pill and you won't be depressed. He didn't tell him that. What he told him is, you need to change. The things you have done in life have kind of burnt you out. And I've got some new things for you to do. I want you to go anoint 2 kings, and I also want you to start a school. And one of your students is going to be greater than you are. He's going to be a challenge to you. And that student's name was Elisha. So what we see is that God had a plan of how to deal with depression without a pill. And God's plan worked. And Elijah got up and he moved on, ever on, and finally he becomes one of 2 men who never saw physical death. But we see him again. And we see him at the Mount of Transfiguration, don't we? Yeah, Elijah was a great character. He was a law restorer, but Elijah had his ups and downs. During the times that we're down, we need to look at these Bible examples as to how they dealt with depressing times. We look at Job. Imagine the sorrow you would have over the sudden death of all 10 of your children, and a house collapses on them during a tornado. And I have a question. Since Job loses all of his livestock, he's got just a handful of servants left, and my question is, who buried those kids? And the Bible doesn't tell us. But my thought on that is, it may be that since there weren't many servants left, it may be that Job and his wife had to go over there and dig those kids out of that rubble and give them a decent burial. That's my guess. Can you imagine the horror of doing that? The death of one person in our family just knocks our socks off. But to lose 10 in the same day, can you imagine grief multiplied by 10? And Job then loses his health, and basically he's lost everything. Sometimes when we get sick, that kind of drives us to a depression, kind of a low spot in our life. and we have to sit and veg while our body recovers. And during all of that, God is with us. Well, these are characters just like us. And through all of this, Job's statement was, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Yeah, every day it seems to get worse, but I still trust the Lord. Well, he did. I don't know that Job ever knew what was going on. Text doesn't tell us he ever knew it. Then we have others who are talked about. We have King Saul, that he had a spirit of depression came from him called an evil spirit. And what he found out is that if he sent for David, David would come and play his harp, and this statement, his music soothes my soul. Now, I work with people, and we do what's called guided imagery, where we have soft music, high alphas are playing. There's a reason for that. And I learned that from King Saul and David. His music soothes my soul. Those high alpha notes release serotonin in our brain. That's one of your neurotransmitters. And when it releases that serotonin, that is your relaxation. That's your chill out chemical in your brain. You ever wonder why you go into a doctor's office, at least back in the day they did, and you go in there and they got that boring doctor's office music? That wasn't just because they like boring music. That's because those high alphas in there are helping you relax before you go in and see the doctor. High alphas. Native American flute music. If that's playing, you have that playing, that kind of thing will kind of help you chill. Back in the day when people had their stereo systems in their home and they had stations on, a lot of time they'd play that real soft music. And you know, it has a calming effect. I don't see many people doing that today. But it still has that calming effect. Those high alpha notes. King Saul knew that. And he sent for David all the more often because of that. King Ahab, remember Ahab and Jezebel? Well, he was so upset. He was so depressed. He was vexed. He laid on his bed. He even turned his face to the wall. He wouldn't even eat because his spirit was so sullen. Judas Iscariot is another Bible example of depression. And in his case, it was suicidal depression. I really believe that the Lord, if the Lord could forgive others, which he did, that he could have forgiven Judas too. But Judas didn't take that route. What Judas did, he took the route of suicide. And sometimes depressed people do that. I am not sure when I study the character of Judas that he ever intended for things to go as far as they did. He knew that Jesus was sinless. He knew that Jesus wasn't guilty. And so, my guess is he thought that he could pass any trial of the Jews or the Romans. But something went wrong. And whereas Judas, who himself was a thief, whereas he decides, well, I'll get a little bit of money here, and I'll get some seed money, and then I'll be able to cut loose from the apostles and Jesus, and you'll be found innocent, and I'll have some money, and I can get on with my life. That's what I think happened. But it didn't happen that way. And so when the tables turned and he realized they're playing for serious, they're going to kill him, Judas goes back to the temple, and he throws the money into the temple, and guess what that meant? That money in the temple polluted that area of the temple. And the people that had to go in and get it, they couldn't celebrate their own Passover because they were unclean. Judas, I think, knew that. But at any rate, Judas goes out and he commits suicide. He gets so depressed, so despondent over what he's done that he just gives up. That goes on today. As a matter of fact, we have a rampage going on with some young people who start out their depression and suicidal thing by cutting You know what I'm talking about with cutting? These are people that'll take and will cut like their wrist, or they cut under their armpit, or other places that are not necessarily real visible, their thighs, and they draw blood. And often when I talk with these people, what they tell me is, I ask them what was going on when you did that, and what they tell me is, I got to the point that I just didn't feel anything. And I knew if I saw the blood pumping out that I could at least feel something. Now, I deal with people like that. And they get better. But a lot of times that suicidal stuff or that depression stuff will take people to cutting, and may ultimately take them to where it just seems like I just want it to stop. There's a young lady I talked with recently, and she had all kinds of problems. One is that she'd had sex before marriage, 14 years old, and the guy that she was with had herpes and gave her herpes, which is incurable and is lifetime. That's going to affect her, even not being able to have a natural birth if she ever marries and gets pregnant. That made her despondent. She had a new boyfriend by the time I saw her, and that new boyfriend kept pressuring her to be intimate. But she didn't want to do that because she didn't want to infect him, but didn't want to tell him that she had a problem. And so all this stuff's churning up inside of her, and then she finds out that boyfriend has another girlfriend, and even posted it on Facebook. She got all upset and decided she would take a whole bunch of Tylenol, which often is used in suicide attempts. Well, we're going to talk about some signs for that a little later on. But people today, especially people that get involved in things way ahead of time, they don't know how to handle the adult issues that go with doing adult things. And as a result, their way of coping is, I need out. That's suicidal depression. Peter also got depressed. Jesus told him, Satan's asked to have you to sift you like wheat. Satan ever do that to you? Did you ever get sifted like wheat? But when you are converted, strengthen your brethren. You see, we can go into the valley, into the pit, but on the other side, we have a story and a journey to share with other people. There's more we could say about that. Paul certainly had his time, his 3 days that he is over in, can't see a thing, and he's praying all that time, and he realizes that his whole life is upside down. That he'd been out persecuting Christians who were the very people that he needed to be like. His whole life was upside down. Did you ever have to reevaluate everything about yourself? Sometimes the counterpart of that is people get into a marriage and things starts going wrong, and they've got to reevaluate the marriage, the lifestyle, the way they act, maybe even the choices they've made in life. And those things can take them down into some very deep holes, some miry pits. Well, if we have a Savior that was tempted in all points like we are, do you think Jesus ever got depressed? If he didn't, I don't know how he was tempted in all points like we are. He had, I believe, sometimes, and here's some verses that would indicate that. When he's in the Garden of Gethsemane, do you think maybe he had some emotions about that? When he's got sweat, as it is drops of blood, you got to be in high anxiety to have that. Really high. Do we think he had any depression over the unbelief of the people? Read some of those verses, and I think what we'll see is that Jesus is a Savior who suffers in all points like we. Here's the point. Yet without sin. We don't have a Savior that's always walked on the top of the water. We have a Savior that sometime had the experience of being in a pit. But yet he didn't sin. He grieved over the rejection of the grace of God, the Garden of Gethsemane, the scourging and the crucifixion. Do you think that brought on any depression or anxiety where he's beaten to where he's half dead? Or we find he learned obedience from the things he suffered. Now there's a message for us, that the things that we suffer, the things we go through, can help us to help others. Tell you a story. The lady used to come forward all the time. Her name was Tammy. She'd come forward a lot. And after she'd come forward and everybody hugged her and we prayed for her and all that, you know how we do that. After the service, she came up to me and she said, Brother Art, I'm not going to come back here anymore. And it surprised me. It's like, well, you just came forward and asked for folks to pray for you. What's going on? And she said, Art, she said, I'm the only sinner here. And I said, well, Tammy, what makes you draw that conclusion? She said, well, I'm the only one saying I've sinned, and I'm the only one people are praying for, and we have other people come in here for years, and they never ask for prayers, so they must have it together, and I don't, so I don't belong here. Well, what I knew is Sister Tammy didn't know what I knew. And there was another sister. Now, I got to tell you about her. Sister Tammy was a biker babe. She had come out of a real rough lifestyle. She'd been with most of the bikers. They'd done their drinking, their drugging, and she'd seen some things she shouldn't have seen. And what she didn't know is there was another sister in that audience just like her. And I knew it. But the sister in the audience had 10 years on her. And she'd given up that lifestyle. So I went to that sister and I said, you know, Sister Tammy needs someone to walk along beside of her. Would you be willing to do that? And you know what she told me? Absolutely not. About like that. It kind of threw me. But somehow Bible verses kind of click when they need to. And I asked her, I said, well, her name was Donna. I said, Donna, in the book of Acts that we're studying, why do you suppose Luke told the same story 3 times? If you're writing a book with 28 chapters, would you tell the same story 3 times in the same book? And you know what the story is. It's conversion of Saul. Acts chapter 9, Acts chapter 22, and 26. And it's the same story with some different details. And she said, well, I don't think I would do that. And I said, well, wonder why Luke did it. And here's what I learned. There is power in your story. There was power in Paul's story. First time, we just learn about it. But the second and third times that it's told with the view that it's told to people who are not in relationship with Jesus, and it's told to help them to see, here's the journey I walked, and that's the journey you need to walk. Now, every one of us has had different experiences in life. Do we go into the valley just for our own benefit? Do we not learn something there that we can share? When we have the loss of a loved one, do we go to the house of mourning just for our own benefit? Or in that, can we learn how to help others that are behind us that will have the same experience and they'll have raw feelings? Do we have something we've learned that we can share and help them as we try to comfort and support them? And I think it's that second one, isn't it? It's not just for us. That's selfish. But we learn things from life and from life's experiences. And my thought on that is we are far too tight-lipped. We need to share our stories with other people. One Sunday night, we didn't have many people there, and we have chairs where I am. So what I did is I told the brethren, I said, you know what, y'all aren't listening to me anyway. pull your chairs into a circle. We're going to talk. We dismissed, and they pulled them in a circle, and I said, here's what I want to know. Tell me about your conversion. What did you do to be saved? And we went around the room, and they each told their story. And you know what? I learned things about them I didn't know. And I gained an appreciation for them that I didn't have before, because I learned something about what they've been through. I think far too often we come to worship, we do what we do here, and then we leave and we don't know each other. There is power in telling our story. Not that we want to brag about war stuff, but that we want to talk about what God's done in our life and how we got where we are today. Have you told your story to anyone? If you haven't, I think you need to. I think there's power in that. Well, that's my think so. Jesus learned obedience from the things that he suffered. Now, what is depression? When I talk about depression, I'm not just talking about someone that got sad because their dog got run over. I'm talking about something much deeper than that. It's different from normal sadness because it tends to engulf the person. It's just like a gloom that settles down over them. It interferes with their ability to work, to sleep, to eat, to have fun even. And that's where the Eeyore syndrome comes in. Feelings of being helpless and hopeless and worthless. Nobody wants to be with me. Pity pot. And very little, if any, relief. Now, that may happen for a day to a person, or it may happen for a couple of days. But if it continues in a sequence, then we start getting into more of the clinical kinds of things. Appetites change, and sometimes people don't eat during times they're depressed, and sometimes they eat way too much. One lady I talked to that put on 40 pounds in a month. She had a rough time with some event happened in her life. I believe she had lost her job. And she sat on the couch and became a couch potato and just kept cramming food in her mouth. You know why? It wasn't because she was hungry. It was because she felt empty. There's a difference in the two. When we feel drained emotionally, spiritually, in any other way, then we look for something to fill that up in us. And often, it's going and getting that bag of Doritos and going to have one or two and eat the whole bag. Or that carton of ice cream, and we're going to have just a taste, and we end up eating the whole thing, and then we want to run down the street and get some more. It's not that people are craving ice cream or Doritos or whatever else we're carrying in our mouth. It's because we're empty. Now, there's something greater to fill our emptiness, and that is the power of the Lord. That fills emptiness. I'm going to get way off topic here, so I'm not going to do that. But if you want to ask me that during the Q&A, we'll talk about that. Loss of energy. Person just feel like they're dragging. I'm not talking about people with COVID here. Self-loathing. I'm just a terrible person. I can't do anything right. I'm worthless. Nobody even wants to be around me. Anybody ever been there? Am I talking to folks that never experienced this? No response. Okay. All right. And then sometimes people who are depressed have reckless behavior because sometimes they don't care if they live or die. They do things that are way out of character and that make no sense. Problems concentrating, and then a lot of times it goes into the physical, the somatic, aches and pains, and so forth. All right. I'm going to zip through this. Now let's talk about teenagers. In teens, some appear very sad and kind of grouchy or yow-yow. I guess yow-yow is an English word. It is now. All right. The school performance often goes down. They start backing off from friends and activities, things that used to bring excitement. They kind of start isolating and withdrawing. And then anger and rage, almost on a split moment, and bounce all the way to the ceiling and back. Maybe even cuss their parents out. If someone criticizes them, there's an overreaction to it. And then maybe some suicidal thoughts, or at least suicidal ideation. The difference in a thought and ideation is maybe, I don't even want to be alive anymore. That's just a statement. But a plan, like, okay, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to take a whole bottle of Tylenol. Or I'm going to get in the car and drive down to the bridge down here and I'm going to run my car into the abutment on the bridge. That's a plan. We deal with people that have plans, and we deal pretty severely with them. That'll get you in a mental hospital real quick. But sometimes people just have that low feeling, I don't even want to be around. And that we can generally talk through. But if someone tells you they're planning to kill themselves, you take that seriously and get them some help. Don't play with that. And if we add substances to that, then we increase the chances that that's going to happen. Now, I was at one place and a whole bunch of people in that congregation were telling me they'd been to the doctor and the doctor told them they were depressed. And I was kind of wondering, what kind of doctors you got in this town that we got so many depressed people here? And I found out. There was one guy that had gone to his doctor, and he told his doctor, I'm tired, I don't have any energy, I've put on some weight, and having a little trouble concentrating. And the doctor, after she found out his name and heard that story, she said, well, you're depressed, I'm going to start you on an antidepressant. This guy happened to be one of my co-therapists. And he said, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I know I'm not depressed because I diagnosed depression. And this and that. You know what was wrong with him? When they checked it out a little bit in more detail, not just start him on an antidepressant, they found out that his blood sugar was pushing, his A1C was pushing 15. That would get a lot of folks in the emergency room. His blood sugar was too high. He was a type 2 diabetic, undiagnosed. And they were going to sail right past that and start him on an antidepressant, which would not have done anything for his blood sugar and the effects, the symptoms that he was having. If the doctor tells you that you're depressed, I want you to do something. I want you to ask the doctor, what kind of depression do I have? Did you know there's 9 kinds? I've got them listed here. I'm not going to go into all of those. But a very common type of the diagnosis is major depression. And that's going to take at least a month progressively to diagnose that. That's not I wake up one morning and I'm depressed. That's not how you diagnose that. The one that is most common is dysthymia. And I see that a lot in church people. Dysthymia is running around with your chin dragging the ground. How you doing? Oh, I'm doing okay. No joy in Mudville, but they can still go to work, they still carry out their job, they still do whatever it is that they do, but they're just not happy people. And for those people, I have to ask the question, if someone were to walk up to you and you tell them that you're a Christian, would they want to be like you? Oh, life is just terrible. Everything around me is going wrong. But tell you what, Jesus will make a change in your life. Why don't you become a Christian? You can be like me. And they look at you and say, I don't want to be like you. Christians should be the happiest people on earth. We not only have the blessings of God in this life, but we've got a mansion waiting for us over yonder, and it's going to be ours, and it's promised by God. And guess what? Our big brother is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Now, if that doesn't get us excited, I don't know what will. What do we have to be depressed about? Well, I'm not going to go into all these different types, but there's 9 types. You want to mess a doctor up, ask him what kind you have. There are several things to look for here, and I'm not going into all those. But here's some strategies to help people that are presenting in your life with depression. First is, when they have negative thoughts, we need to try to help them to turn those negative thoughts into positive thoughts. Okay? Don't do it for them. Someone says, everything stinks in my life. Isn't anything going good? Challenge that. That's a cognitive distortion. Challenge that. Everything? Everything? Waking up this morning on the top side of the green and you don't have COVID? That's not a good thing. Everything's not bad. I ask people sometime, all right, the things that are worrying you, why don't you write those down so we don't forget any of those and we can go over that. And what I encourage people to do is we need to have a time of day that's your worry time. And let's pick a time that you can just sit down and worry. All right? That time comes, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That's my worry time. All right, you got 30 minutes to worry. Sit there and worry. And you know what? People don't do that. When I give them permission to worry, they don't want to do it. Sometime I'll do that in a session. All right. So you're worried, so you sit there and worry for 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll talk about what you're worrying about. We need to work with people also about accepting the uncertainty of life. Everything's not pre-planned. Everything doesn't always work right. We need to learn to handle disappointments. You know where you learn that? You learn that when you're a little kid. And some adults have never had that experience. And then we need to take care of ourselves, of our hygiene, and of our relaxation. Some of us remember all the hype about the mechanized washing machines and different appliances around the house. And you know how they advertise those? We've got all these time-saving devices. Remember that? Where's the time you saved? We figured how to fill it back up. It didn't save us any time at all. Fact is, everybody only gets 24 hours. Nobody gets 26. What you do with the time is what adds the quality to your life. Well, relaxation techniques. A lot of people go around all uptight, and they have all this anxiety and depression in them. And you know how it shows? Holding the muscles tight. That'll create some TMJ and some grinding of your teeth, and it'll wear them down. And you may end up with some real problems in your jaws. They hold it in their neck. So their neck is, they got to keep winding their neck back and forth or go to the chiropractor. They hold it in their shoulders, walk around all tight. And some of the little exercises that I do with people that are depressed, it's like, okay, before we get into this conversation, let's stand up, let's do some arm rotations, let's shrug our shoulders, do all that stuff. And some people look kind of funny because they never did that before. And we do all that kind of stuff. And we learn how to breathe. Did you ever watch a little baby breathe? You watch them in their crib. In fact, these little babies, when they breathe, look like frogs. That little gut goes, you know. But somewhere along the line, somebody told us if you breathe like that, you'll look fat. So suck it up. Suck it in. And you know what we do? We do that. And what happens? Our stomach muscles don't relax. And we kind of move our breathing up. we need to learn how to breathe. You know the way to breathe is not to hold your breath. I'll talk to people and I realize they're getting uptight because as they're getting their stress going in their body, what they do is they stop breathing. And that's a stress response. Because when people are being chased by the bear or something that's got them all jittery and excited, they will go shallow breath. The police academy people will sometimes make fun, the officers in training sometimes make fun of each other. Is they'll get out here and they'll get in one of these situations and somebody scares them and it's like they get in this high voice. All right, put your hands up. Why they do that? Because they quit breathing due to high stress. And their voice goes up. You watch people when they get mad and see if they don't screech. Why? Because they don't breathe. So what do? Take 5 deep breaths. Inhale, each one, all the way, hold it, and then release it. And when you release it in your shoulders too. All the way. Then do it again. Do that 5 times. Now I have people do that a lot, and you know what? I'll ask them, well, how do you feel now? Well, I don't feel quite as anxious. Okay. Well, that's a simple technique that you can use. And a lot of times, and I do that too, when I'm out in traffic and people are zipping here and there, I'll have to remind myself, all right, Art. I do talk to myself. All right, Art, you need to breathe. Breathe. Don't forget to breathe. I tell other people that, and it becomes natural for me to forget to do that. So I had to do something about it. Eat regularly, and when you go to any medical or professional person, what they're going to tell you is you need not only a balanced diet, but a regular diet. When you don't have the proper fuel, then your body cannot do what it's designed to do. And then, this is what doctors will tell you. You'll pay them good money to tell you this. Exercise regularly. That doesn't mean you have to wear yourself out every time. But get out there and do some exercise. And then get enough sleep. They'll tell you that. Here's some warning signs of suicide. And I'm going to cover these, and then I'm going to talk more about anxiety. But those that are suicidally depressed generally are going to do something that's risk-taking because they really don't care if they live or die. They may stop eating. What is the purpose of eating? To give you energy to live. But if you're not planning to live, why do you need to eat? And so some people will go on starvation kind of diets or not particularly interested in eating. They lose their appetite. Person may have a plan. They may start giving their stuff away or have some kind of a plan of how they're going to do themselves in. Be careful if there are other suicides of their friends that have happened close to them, because we get imitation sometime. And a precursor, a warning, is if the person's tried it before, or if they have a significant loss. My loved one died, and I don't even want to live anymore. I would rather go and be with them. And that loved one may not be a human. That loved one may be my cat died. Because people form bonds with animals too. And animals carry family history. And when that animal dies, it can very much put a person into depression. And then if people start using chemicals, that's going to increase the chances of suicidal depression by about 60%. Okay, let's talk about the link now between anxiety and depression. That's depression, that's the quick version, even though it didn't take quick. But let's talk a little bit about anxiety, then the lesson will be yours. In the days of people that were in other cultures, here's a man lives in a cave, and it's time to eat. So he goes out of the cave, and he's going to pick some berries. And he's out here picking these berries, and he looks between the leaves here, and there's a bear on the other side of that berry thing, because bears like berries too. And so there's a bear there. And that bear looks him in the eye, and the bear says, maybe I'll have a little meat with these berries. And this guy takes off and starts running back to this cave. But what's happened to that man? His breathing got shallow. The blood flowing to his non-vital organs stops. And his body response, the stress response, is that which takes all the energy and protects the vital organs. And he takes off running. If he doesn't get back to the cave, then that story ends there. But if he gets back to the cave and he gets in there, he's out of breath. And he's sitting there and my, and wow, that bear almost got me. And it takes him a little while to settle down, but you know what happens when he settles down? He goes into a post-crisis drain where now he wants to sit and rest, and he may even fall asleep. That's the post-crisis drain. That's the cycle of stress. And actually, people today use the term stress. I'm so stressed, and I want to tell you now, people need to be stressed. You have to be stressed to live. We're not talking about stress. We're talking about strain. There's a difference. If I go down to the gym and want to build my muscles up, you know what I want to do? I want to stress them. Now, I don't want to strain them, but I want to stress them. Pump them and get them where they're supposed to be. Be the strong man. The strain's what we're talking about. When things start straining on us, that's when we get into this high anxiety. Now, I'm going to leave these PowerPoints and I'm just going to talk. When I first started looking at anxiety, I had 3 verses that I used. Matthew 6:25, these are all on the PowerPoints. Matthew 6:25, where we're told not to be anxious for what you're going to eat, what you're going to wear. Philippians talks to us about that, Philippians 4. And 1 Peter 5:7 says, cast your cares upon him, nothing be anxious, but cast your cares on him because he cares for you. And those 3 verses just kind of rung true. And I wrote this wonderful lesson about how anxiety was a sin. And I was wrong. Because there's more on it than 3 verses. It was a good lesson, but it just wasn't true. But at the end of that little exercise, I asked the question, if Jesus underwent the things we undergo, did he ever have any anxiety? How about Paul and the apostles? Were they ever anxious? And then I remembered some verses. That Paul was shipwrecked. He was a day and a night in the deep. He's bobbing up and down in the water. He didn't know what's going to grab him from underneath. He didn't know if he was going to live or die. He talked about how on him daily was the anxiety for all the churches. And he uses the word anxiety. Now in this lesson, if I just use those 3 verses, am I condemning Paul? Am I condemning the heroes of faith? What am I doing here as I look at this? These are the verses that talk about that. But all people worry. The Apostle Paul had his times he worried. Fact is, he left one of his preaching tours because he wondered what happened to Timothy. And he backtracks because he thinks something's happened to the man. And he's concerned enough, he stops what he's doing and tries to find him. There's some anxiety with that. Epaphroditus is talked about as a person who had who had some anxiety. Actually, Paul talked about him, said, I was afraid he was going to die. Well, there's a little anxiety goes with that, don't you think? And then we looked at Elijah and Paul. He says, we're afflicted in every way, not crushed, perplexed, but not despairing, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying about in the body the dying of Jesus, so the life of Jesus may be manifest in our body. You know, Paul had a lot of things happen to him. He was beaten. Do you think that would make you a little anxious, being beaten? A lot of things happened to him. Paul talked about how they were afflicted on every side. Look at this. Conflicts without, fears within. What's that? That's anxiety. Fears. Afraid of the uncertain. That's anxiety. Paul talked about the pressure on him daily with all the churches and other verses, and these are things you can have. All right, what are some causes of anxiety? Daily difficulties. The Israelites were concerned about what they're going to eat. And then they were concerned that's all they had to eat. Speaking of that, how would you like to eat the same thing for 40 years? Breakfast, lunch, and supper. Ms. Moses could have made some money if she'd written Ms. Moses' cookbook on 1,001 ways to make manna. People have family concerns. Some of y'all were in the back when that was mentioned, that I got a message yesterday that my 40-year-old son has COVID, was diagnosed. That's a concern for me. That's in the back of my head. You know, I've talked to him a couple times today. But that's a concern. I talked to other people who have had COVID, and some are pretty young. And what they'll tell me is, man, I really thought I was going to die. Well, not all of them say that, but some of them do. Sometimes people are worried because of ungodly living. They're afraid somebody's going to come and arrest them because they've done something they shouldn't do. Or they've been cheating on their mate. They're afraid they're going to get caught. Anxiety is about irrational fears. But those fears may actually be something that could happen. Daily difficulties. The Israelites had their times of anxiety, and they asked Moses, why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? There's no food, no water, and we loathe this miserable food. That's the manna. Saul said to his servant with him, come, let us return, or else my father will cease to be concerned about the donkeys and will become anxious for us. There you have anxiety in the Bible. And many other verses. David said this, when I kept silent about my sin, my body wasted away through my groanings all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me. My vitality was drained away, even as the fever heat of summer. What's David saying there? David's saying, when you try to shut your mouth and keep your secret, you're going to get sick. In recovery circles, we say it this way, you're only as sick as the secrets you keep. One of Satan's greatest tools is to get you to hold it all in. And you know what happens when you hold it all in? You set yourself up for something inevitable. And that is an early death with cancer, diabetes, 1 or 2, heart problem, heart attack, stroke, or other maladies. That's what stress does to us. anxiety. Many verses here. I'm not going to go over all these. Panic attacks. I'll cover this. We'll wrap this up pretty quick. Panic attack, most people will have a panic attack at least one time in their life. It will come on suddenly, and it will feel something like this. It will feel either like you're disconnecting, that your body and your mind are disconnecting, you're out here, and it's surreal. You might even have a little trouble remembering your name in a moment like that. Somebody talk to you, you have trouble answering because you feel fragmented. More often than not, what a person will do is they'll start seeing stars. Not because they stood up too quick and got dizzy, but because there's some stuff going on in the body. Panic attack will often cause a person to be nauseated, or it may cause them to be so uptight that when they finally relax, that they're no good for the rest of the day. Panic attacks, whether the object of the attack is something real or something imagined. The human mind and the stress response does not know the difference between something real and something imagined. I'll give you an example of that. We take a bloody coat to Jacob. Jacob's conclusion is, my son Joseph is dead. A wild animal's killed him. And for 13 years he believed that. And you know the nature of lies, his brothers even got to the point they believed it. And they told it to Joseph. Sometimes we get caught in our own lies, but that's another topic. But Daddy believed his son was dead. But his son wasn't dead. His son survived all that and actually rose to the top as the dreams told. But we can believe things that aren't true and be impacted by those untruths. That's how panic is. Feeling like you're going crazy, chest pounding, trouble breathing, feel like you're choking, hyperventilation, nausea, stomach cramps, so forth. All right. So what do we do with all that? Here's some things we can do to address panic, anxiety. Start our day off with a regular routine. That routine, I suggest, would be when you get up in the morning, do not turn your TV on. Why would you want to start your day with your stomach up in your mouth? Because you're watching all the stuff that happened overnight. Why not start your day with the Lord? Have a prayer, a quiet time, a meditation time. What needs to be done today? Get your thoughts organized. Most folks don't take the time to do that. They hit the road running. Turn the TV on, and boom, here we go. And we start life out in the negative. Get some emotional support from the people around you. Who do you look to that kind of gives you that little booster shot each day? Take care of your body, which means go to bed right at the right times, get enough rest. Be careful for your hygiene. You know, people feel better when they're clean. And one of the big signs of panic and anxiety and depression is people don't take care of their hygiene. I'll tell you what, you don't want people to come around you. That's a good way to do that. If you stink, folks aren't going to want to be near you, especially not downwind. Okay. Look at the kinds of responsibilities you have. And I talk to a lot of people that say, my boss just keeps loading the work on me more and more and more and more. And what I tell them is, have you talked with your supervisor? Well, they'll think I can't do my job. That's not what I told you to talk about. What I tell them to talk about is you lay your workload down, and if your supervisor is supervising, ask them, how do you recommend that I organize this in such a way that I can get it done? And your supervisor will be able to see, that's a lot of stuff. And they may not have even noticed that. I've supervised a lot of people. And when someone comes to me and says, all right, I need you to help me prioritize this. I'm not going to be able to get all this done. I'm taking work home at night. I'm getting up early in the morning to do it. I don't want you to mess up your family life and your free time in order to do that. But I don't know you've got a problem if you don't share it or at least ask me to help you with it. A good supervisor will do that. So if we're overloaded, and if your supervisor doesn't help you with that, maybe it's time to start looking. There's lots of jobs these days. Do we ask for help when we need it, or we just let people dump stuff on us because we're a people pleaser? Is your life in balance? And if my work is my life and my life is my work, I'm not in balance. Sometimes professional treatment is needed. There are a number of places that you can get professional treatment, including me. That was a commercial. Here's what we don't tell people. Oh, well, you got a lot on you. That'll just make you stronger. Well, time heals all wounds. I know how you feel. No, you don't. You're not me. You'll never know how I feel because you're not me. Well, it could be a lot worse. It'll work out by itself. Here's some ways to help, and that is active listening. Sometimes people just need to talk. Show empathy and concern. Offer to help them. Anything I can do to help you lighten the load here? Bear one another's burdens would be a passage to come in there. Just somebody you can talk to. And have some of those things available. And what we don't want to get caught in is this: you need to read your Bible and do more praying. I'm not against that. I'm all for that. But we've got to do more than that. And what that means is to either know what resources are there or people that can help us with those resources. Here's something to remember. Now, I know the time is late, and I want you to remember this if you remember nothing else. 211. 211. Not 911. 211. And you know what that is? That's the National Resource Helpline for all mental health and addiction issues across the country. Now, those folks don't know what's happening in Indianapolis. They're reading that off of a catalog they have, but they can give you the information so you can chase stuff down without having to do it yourself. You don't have to recreate the wheel. 211. Encourage them to get help for their depression. Don't sit out here by yourself and get more depressed. There is help. Help is available. Okay? And if something is really critical, they may need to go to ER. Pray to God. And if this is something that is a sin that's driving this, then we need to confess that sin and the misbehavior that may be causing the anxiety. Fear I'm about to get caught with something. And then find an alternative and instead of to do. And often what that needs to be is find someone that's worse off than you and go help them. You may find it's not so bad. Okay. And then finally, change the channel. Here's what that means. Refocus onto some things that are positive. Our remote control may be stuck, and so we need to go to the gratitude channel. I dealt with some folks down the street here, a veteran service, for about 8 years. I had them for 2 years. These were people that were on the street when we first found them. We housed them. We helped them get back on their feet and be productive. We had a track record of 92% success for the nation, and that got the attention of Washington. They sent people out to find out what we were doing. But one of the things I insisted on every day, you gentlemen come out of your apartments, or you soldiers, come out of your apartment, you come down here into this group room, and every day I want you to tell me what you're thankful for. 3 things you're thankful for. And every day I want you to tell me 3 things you plan to do today that will make your day worth living. And then we read a meditation and had a prayer each morning. I see some of those guys from time to time. You know what they tell me? We're still doing our gratitudes, Art. Because instead of waking up and figuring out what's wrong, they started waking up figuring out what is there to be thankful for. And I told them it's against the rules to say the same thing. It's 2 days in a row. Had to have something new all the time. Well, they're still doing it. Go to the beauty channel. What are some beautiful things in life? There are beautiful things. Go to the love channel. What are the things that are lovely? What are the things of good report? What are the things of virtue and praise? There's a Bible verse on that. Think on these things, and there's a promise with it. And the peace of God will guard your heart and your life in Christ Jesus. You get your thinking straight, and your life can get straight. There are many things that we want to talk about in this, and I've already talked way too long, and I appreciate you listening carefully. But I want to suggest to you that we will all have times that we will be anxious. We'll all have times we'll be depressed. But during all those times, we're still Christians. And we still are required to serve God during those times. And we learn lessons. Whether we're on the top of the mountain or whether we're down in the valley, we learn lessons that will help us in life. I thank you for your kind attention this evening. If there are those here who need to have some prayers, maybe you're out in one of those deep pits. Maybe you're up on the top of the mountain. If you're on the top of the mountain, let him that thinks he stand take heed lest he fall. If you're down in the pit, you need to come out, and we can help you do that. And if you're having depression of some sort and need some help with that, that all things are available. You have resources right here. And I would just ask you, if you need to respond, would you come as we